So in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to take a new piece of film, okay, and turn it into something that looks like an old piece of film using the post-production piece of software, After Effects. Now After Effects is a post-production piece of software, meaning that in terms of editing you should still be using Premiere Pro to do your edits. Okay, so this is an example of one of Ryan's films here, and in this I'm just going to make a slight change because between this shot and this shot, as you can see, Luke's hands in that frame are on the table, then they're in the air. Now obviously in terms of a nice continuity edit, what I'd be looking for is to cut it sort of when his hands are on the table so that it makes sense in terms of continuity. So I'm just going to quickly finish this edit, cut there, go back to the last shot, which is right here, and then make a cut there to take out the middle bit. Okay, delete the blank space, and then you'll see that that kind of makes a bit more sense in terms of its continuity. Okay, so yeah, what I'm going to do then is, obviously this is now a sequence, so I can actually use this sequence in Premiere straight away in After Effects. Okay, so in other words, you can go to After Effects. When you start a new composition though, it's going to ask you all these settings, so you need to be aware of what this footage is in terms of its settings. So one easy way of finding out is to go to Sequence and go Sequence Settings. It will then show you that it is 25 frames per second, okay, and it's 1280 by 720. Another way of doing that in Premiere Pro is to go to File, Export, and when you bring this box up, it will show you what the original sequence was. So it's 1280 by 720, and it's 25 frames per second. So just cancel out that. If I go into After Effects, then when I start a new composition, check that those things match so that your footage matches. There's all these here, or you can do custom, but if I choose this 720, that's the correct one to match the settings that I'm going to be importing. I then go to File and Import, and I can actually import this file directly from the Premiere Pro project file because it's part of the Adobe suite. Obviously all the software is compatible, which is really useful because we can then open up this sequence as it is in the sequence. Now what's useful about that is that when I've got that now in my After Effects program, if I change it in Premiere Pro, then After Effects will also update it because it's actually looking at the sequence as it is live in Premiere Pro. So that's quite a useful little feature. This, what I'm going to do though to this in terms of applying some filters over the top, this is what's often referred to in the post-production world as grading. So when you take a film and you give it a certain look, give it a certain filter, and you basically apply that grading to the entire film. So it's something that you should do after you've done all your editing. Okay, so once you've edited everything you want, if you're making a silent movie, for example, you then need to make the new sort of digital film look like old analog style film. And there's a really good way of doing that in After Effects, and you can do it firstly by selecting new here and adding an adjustment layer. Now you'll see that these things work in layers exactly the same way as Photoshop works or Illustrator, so the layers are in order, one on top of the other. This adjustment layer though, I'm going to add an effect to, and the first effect I'm going to do is a color corrector. Okay, so as I add the tint of color, straight away by default it goes to black and white, but I'm going to map the white to a more kind of sepia tone, so I want orange, and then I go to that kind of sepia rendering, just like probably about there would be cool, you know, and that's one thing that I'm going to do. I'm then going to just add a bit more contrast, because generally speaking older films had a bit more contrast. So a good way of adding contrast, and in fact a good way of manipulating all kinds of color correction in After Effects, is to use this curves function. Okay, so if you go to your color correction, you'll see there's a setting called curves. Now this allows you to play with it and sort of move it around there. You can add a bit more exposure, you can take out a bit of light, and you can boost up the contrast. So I'm going to add the contrast to this bit of footage by just using my curves until it kind of gets that old-fashioned sort of film look to it. Okay, so yeah, I'm happy with that. That's great. I'm then going to add a bit of grain, make it look a bit grainy. Okay, so I'm just adding all of these effects look onto this adjustment layer. Because this is primarily a color correction, I'm going to hit enter and I'm going to call it CC just to remind me that that is my color correction layer. Keep everything well organized. Okay, and if you want to see what's on it, do the drop down here. You can see I've got the effects, the transformation, and you can obviously then manipulate any of those things. I'm going to add another effect, so I'm going to go to effects and I'm going to go to noise and grain. I'm just going to add a bit of grain, okay, and then in the actual grain thing here, rather than preview, I'm going to go to final output and it will show me what that looks like. Made it a bit grainy. Okay, again, all the settings are here if you want to change or tweak any of those things, or even just have a play around and see what they look like. But that is my color correction right there. Now the other thing that I want to do to make it give it that old film look, okay, is just to add a sort of bit of animated scratches and stuff. So what I do for that is I right click again, go new solid layer, okay, make sure the background solid color is black because I want it black. I'm going to change the name of it to scratches. Okay, so this is going to be my scratches layer. At the moment it just looks black because it's like that. If you, however, go onto here, you should be able to add another column. If you can't see this, you'll need to see the mode, because the mode that you want to be able to see in this, okay, is an add mode rather than the normal mode. So if we go to our scratches here, I'm going to put an effect on this and I'm going to put a bit of noise and grain. This time I'm going to go to fractal noise and it comes up with this kind of cloud looking thing. Okay, then with my fractal noise, what I'm going to do, okay, is go to transform, and untick this uniform scaling, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the width only 1 pixel thin, so that's really, really, really thin. Make the height 10,000 high. Okay, I'm also going to change the contrast to 250 to boost that up, and I'm going to change the brightness to -100. Okay, you then get this kind of scratch effect, right? So what I want to do now is just animate that. So in order to animate, I can use this evolution setting here because it makes it twiddle around the screen. So if I hold Alt and hit the clock stopwatch button here, which is your keyframes, I can actually add some time to that. So if I say time and times 200, then over that time, what it will do is it will actually then animate it. You see, it put these buttons in here and then it moves. Okay, so it rotates. So I've got that kind of scratch effect going on there. In terms of this mode, is very important because this needs to be add mode, and then it adds it to over the film. Okay, so we've now got some scratches. So what I want to do now is add some more movement to this. Okay, so now I've got this layer of scratches which move, and they move with the film. I now may well want to just animate that again, but with a different sort of style. So I'm going to copy it, and to copy it you just press Control and D, or if you're on a Mac you press Command or the Apple key and D, and it duplicates it. So now I've got the same thing duplicated here. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the scratches so they look slightly different. Okay, so within my fractal noise here, remember I transformed the last one. If I go back to that and I tick back onto my uniform scaling, you see it makes these sort of blotchy things come, which is quite nice. And what I'm going to do then is just change the contrast to 350. Okay, and I'm going to change the brightness to -150. Alright, So I've got that, and then maybe, so now when you sort of scrub through that, you get this effect of these sort of scratches and burns in the sort of film like you used to have in old films. Okay, so that's how you animate the scratches. The next thing I'm going to do is just sort of vignette the edges, because a lot of old film had sort of vignette edges. So in order to do that, I'm going to go new again. I'm going to add another solid. Okay, it's a black solid, but I'm going to change the name to vignette, because that's what it is. And again, it just helps you keep these layers in order so we know what's going on. I'm going to choose my ellipse tool, which is this one, and double click on it. Gives you an ellipse. Okay. Now in terms of the mask, so if you right click on it, okay, in terms of the mask mode, you want it to be a subtract mode rather than an add, so it sort of inverts that shape there. Okay, so you've got it in subtract mode there. I then just want to sort of rough out the edges a little bit. Okay, so if I feather them, you just press F and it'll bring up the mask feather there. Okay, and I'm just going to feather it to 250. Alright, so then it's got that kind of rough edge there. It's a little bit dark, so what I'm also going to do is just change the opacity on it. So, you know, I've got my opacity here, I'm going to go down to 50 as well, just so it's not as dark, just a kind of subtle, again, it's just the sort of old style lens that used to look like that. Okay, yeah, and that's about it really in terms of your effect. The final thing that you might want to do is, if you want to go back to that, if you're happy with that and you want to save that as an effect, you can save it. So if you select all of your different bits that make it up and go to animation, you can then sort of apply that. Just hit your curves there, go save animation preset, and you can save it as old film, for example, and then you'll see under the animation presets you've got, under your user presets, you've now got an old film effect which you can then apply. So another useful thing that you might want to do at this stage is obviously save your color correction layer, because obviously that's got your grading settings which comprise of these tint, curves and the grain, and this can have as many layers of different effects as you want. Now if you want to save that, you then need to go to save animation preset. Okay, it will then allow you to actually save it. So I've already got mine there, old film, but I'll save it again, that just replace. Then it will come out and be available to you at any point here under user presets, so you can then apply that to any other film. So if you've got a special grading the way you actually like it, if you've tweaked it, then obviously you can apply it and it's not going to be any different. It'll be exactly what you've saved here. Finally, the last thing to do obviously is, just now you're happy with that effect, you might want to just render it. So you don't sort of export in After Effects. What you do is you render, and you go to the composition, because it's all about the composition, add to render queue. Okay, queue your output here, so decide where you want to save it. I'm going to go for documents, okay, and I'm going to call it old film effect. Okay, and then I just go save, and then check your settings here. So output mode, I would tend to go with QuickTime. QuickTime's the best one to export to, and then you go OK, and then you hit render. Now the film will start to render, okay, and it will start to render the effect that you've just done, and it will then save this as an old style looking film. Okay, so now obviously the rendering has finished, and it should be saved wherever you told it to save. Okay, mine's old film effect, here it is. So the final version of that now looks like this. You can see that a sort of old film effect on it, and you know, you can tweak any of the sort of settings by going to the different parameters if you want less or more lines, or more burns in the film, depending on what you want really, but yeah, that's how you do it. So I hope you enjoyed that tutorial.